Hello dear friends, this is your personal English coach Divyam here, and today we're going to see an interesting poem called Television, written by Roald Dahl. Now, let's see a little bit about the poet. Roald Dahl is one of the most prolific modern writers in English and is well known as children's author. He has written a lot of poems relating to children. The poem Television is a famous poem of Dahl that advises and inspires to read books instead of watching the television. This is one of the most relevant poems of our times. The poem takes a comic look at a serious problem among young children today. It warns us about the dangers of watching television excessively. TV robs our mind of the power of imagination and creativity. He advises us to read books as it will enable us to discover deeper levels of joy, find fulfillment in life, and open a whole new and exciting world for us. The poem is a long one, but very simple in language and form. It follows rhymed limbic tetrameter lines throughout the poem with no stanza division. The poet has capitalized the important portions, especially where he talks about undesired consequences of watching the television. So let's jump into the poem and understand what it means. Let's focus on the first 6 lines. The most important thing we've learned so far as children are concerned is never let them near your television set, or better still, just don't install the idiotic thing at all. So, Dahl advises from his experience that people should never allow their children to go near the television set. It is even better not to install the idiotic thing called television at all. But why is television an idiotic thing according to the poet? Throughout the entire poem, Dahl attempts to answer it. Let's move on to the next set of lines. In almost every house we've been, we've watched them gaping at the screen. They loll and slop and lounge about and stare until their eyes pop out. Last week, in someone's place, we saw a dozen eyeballs on the floor. So here the poet shares his experience. In almost every house he has visited, he has watched children gaping at the screen. They were staring with their eyes wide open and with absolute concentration of mind. For sitting a long time before the television set, they become tired. Sometimes they sit or lie in lazy and casual manner, loll and slop and lounge about. It means sit or lie in lazy and casual manner. And they get sloppy. But still they stare at the television until their eyes are too tired to watch anymore, which means their eyes pop out. All these are not Dahl's imagination. He indeed saw a dozen eyeballs, that is, half a dozen children sitting on the floor at someone's house very recently, say last week. Let's move on to the next lines. They sit and stare and stare and sit until they're hypnotized by it, until they're absolutely drunk with all that shocking, ghastly junk. When the children are before a television set, they sit and stare for long hours. They don't seem to be moving from there, as they probably forget everything around them in the real world. Rather, the one they watch on television becomes real for the time being. They are almost hypnotized by this idiotic box. They're absolutely drunk. Their minds are filled with those shocking, ghastly junk which are mostly unreal and inappropriate for the age. Those TV shows kill their valuable time and make them lazy with no room for their physical play and exercise. They have no scope of spending time with books and nature and interacting with others. Their minds fill with images and stories of virtue compared to the drunk man's imaginary world in apt metaphor here. Let's move on to the next line. Oh yes, we know it keeps them still. They don't climb out the window sill. They never fight or kick or punch. They leave you free to cook the lunch and wash the dishes in the sink. Now the poet says that he knows that the television keeps the naughty children calm. When they are in front of a TV set, they no more do mischievous things like climbing out the windowsill, fighting, kicking, punching. They let the mother free to cook the lunch and wash the dishes in the sink without any disturbance. But that can't be an excuse to let them sit before a TV, because the poet thinks that the idiotic device does more harm than good. But did you ever stop to think, to wonder just exactly what this does to your beloved tot? It rots the sense in the head. It kills imagination dead. The poet now asks the parent whether they ever spent a moment to think exactly what harm this television does to their loving child. He himself answers it in a brilliant way. Watching the television regularly damages the sense in the head. Children are drawn away from the reality, the real world around them. He just believes what he watches without considering the context. His own environment hardly matches with the ones he sees on the screen, but still he thinks all that are real and applicable to him. It also kills the power of imagination in the mind. Children start to live in present imaginary world what they are seeing on the screen. They slowly lose their own creative thinking, their own imagination. Though what TV shows display are most fictional, that is, a close imagination of the real world, not a completely different world as in the fairy tale. Let's move on to the next set of lines. It clogs and clutters up the mind. It makes a child so dull and blind. Roald Dahl, the poet, continues to argue on how the television affects a child's mind. Children watch different shows on different channels. Sometimes there are contradictory ideas, opposite ideas. Sometimes it does not match with reality and they are surprised. Thus, these things clogs and clutters up the mind, messes up the organized ideas and thoughts. Moreover, the child forgets to think on his own. His entire mind is full of images he has seen on the TV. So how would he get the time and scope to think over other things? His important time is wasted in thoughts that are fictional and not related to his own life. Thus, his study and thoughts on how to improve his skills and personality are neglected. This is as if the child gradually becomes dull and blind. Next line. He can no longer understand a fantasy, a fairyland. Now the poet feels that due to the imposed limitation on thoughts, children can no longer understand a fantasy or a fairy tale. They cannot extend their imaginative power to that level. They are now used to see an image of the likely real world, which is a virtual reality. His brain becomes as soft as cheese. His powers of thinking rust and freeze. He cannot think, he only sees. Let's understand the meaning of these lines. Dahl now opines that by watching television, the brain becomes soft like cheese. Children now believe everything they watch or hear on TV. They cannot find their own logic to analyze and interpret a thing. The power of thinking, the thought process, freezes and gets rusty. They cannot think on their own. All they do is watching and believing what others say on TV. Moving on to the next set of lines. Alright, you'll cry. Alright, you'll say. But if we take the set away, what shall we do to entertain our darling children? Please explain. Now the poet says that he knows what the reader, or especially the parents, would ask him. The question is how parents shall entertain their affectionate children if they take the TV sets away from them. The poet has answered in the following lines. We will answer this by asking you, what used the darling ones to do? How used they kept, or how used they keep themselves contented before this monster was invented? Have you forgotten? Don't you know? The poet answers the above question only by throwing a question. What people used to do to keep themselves entertained when television was not invented? TV set is a dreaded device, a monster to him. He wants people remind what they used to do in the absence of such a device. The last set of lines, or we can say the next 4 lines, they used to read. They would read and read and read and read and then proceed to read some more. Great Scots, gadzooks, one half their lives was reading books. Meaning, the poet himself reminds us that children in earlier times used to read lots of books. Surprisingly, people then spent half of the time by reading books. Great Scott, gadzooks is an expression of surprise or amazement here. The nursery shelves held books galore. Which means, in those earlier days, the nursery shelves were full of books. In nursery schools, books remained scattered on the floor. Even in their home, the bedroom and the bed, books cluttered up everywhere. Moving on to the next lines. Books cluttered up the nursery floor and in bedroom by the bed. We just saw the meanings of these lines, that even in their homes, the bedroom and the bed, books cluttered up everywhere. Books were everywhere. Moving on to the next set of lines. Such wondrous, fine, fantastic tales of dragons, gypsies, queens and whales. Give me 1 second here. I will switch to reading mode so that I can highlight certain things here. Okay, the next set of lines. Such wondrous, fine, fantastic tales of dragons, gypsies, queens and whales, and treasure isles and distant shores, where smugglers rowed with muffled oars, and pirates wearing purple pants, and sailing ships of elephants, and cannibals crouching around the pot, steering away at something hot. It smells so good, what can it be? Good gracious, it's Penelope. What is the meaning of these lines? Here the poet talks about the popular books of adventures that children used to read in his times. In those days, boys and girls read fantastic stories of dragons, gypsies, queens, whales, treasure islands, smugglers, pirates, ships, elephants, cannibals, and so on. So the poet is just giving an example of how the kids were at his time. Moving on to the next set of lines. The younger one had Beatrix Potter with Mr. Todd, the dirty rotter, and Squirrel Nutkin, Pigling Bland, and Mrs. Tiggy Winkle, and just how the camel got his hum, and how the monkey lost his rum, and Mr. Toad and bless my soul, there's Mr. Rat and Mr. Mole. Oh, books, what books they used to know, those children living long ago. So, the younger children used to read the stories written by Beatrix Potter, an author of children's books featuring animals with colorful illustrations. Dahl here pays a tribute to the children author for her fantastic stories on animals. He also mentions some of the stories like how the camel got his hump and some characters like Mr. Toad, Mrs. Tiggy Winkle, etc. from those stories. This shows the poet's love for those books and how he enjoyed them in his days. So please, oh please, we beg, we pray, go throw your TV set away, and in its place you can install a lovely bookshelf on the wall. What does this mean? The poet now requests the parents for their own good to throw away their television set and install a bookshelf in its place. Next line. Then fill the shelves with lots of books, ignoring all the dirty looks, the screams and yells, the bites and kicks, and children hitting you with sticks. What does this line mean? After installing the bookshelf in place of TV set, the parents will face some dirty looks, maybe screaming, maybe yells and bites and kicks. They may even hit them with sticks. But the poet insists on filling that shelf with lots of books on various topics, ignoring all those screaming and such tantrums. Let's move on to the next line. Fear not, because we promise you that in about a week or two of having nothing else to do, they will now begin to feel the need of having something to read. Dahl assures us that after a week or two, those children would find nothing to do without a TV set around, so they will finally feel the need to read books. They will come closer to books on their own. Moving on to the next set of line. And once they start, oh boy, you watch the slowly growing joy that fills their hearts. They'll grow so keen. They'll wonder what they had ever seen in that ridiculous machine, that nauseating, fall, unclean, repulsive television screen. What's the meaning of these lines? And once they start reading, the only way is ahead of them. They will find it interesting to read more and more books that will give them the imagination and thoughts, the knowledge and wisdom, the satisfaction of mind and heart. And at one stage, they will grow so keen on reading books that they will wonder what they had found in that silly machine called television. They will find the television screen disgusting and unclean then, as they will discover the real joy of reading books. And finally, the last two lines, and later, each and every kid will love you more for what you did. And finally, each and every kid will love the parents for giving them the opportunity to find real joy in reading books. Even when they would grow up, they would thank their parents for taking that television set away and installing the bookshelf there. The poet advocates for reading and only reading. Dahl thinks TV can never be a substitute for books. Books are the only things that can deliver real wisdom. So friends, I hope you understood the poem. If not, if you have doubts, please mention them in comment section. Do give me a feedback so that I know how I perform. And if in case you have any other topic that you want me to simplify and explain, please mention it in the comment section and I will be very happy to help you, and I will make a video just for you. I thank you and hope you have a fantastic day ahead.